All right. Well, welcome everybody. We have about a minute before we get started. If you don't mind, please tell us in the chat what project management tools are you currently using at your organization or district, and are you currently implementing or using a project charter? So go ahead and answer those two questions in the chat. We're going to make it as interactive as possible within the virtual world. So make sure that you're and inputting any questions you have. But for now, let's just go ahead and get started by answering those two questions. Get started in maybe 2 minutes. All right, we're getting some answers. A few folks are sharing where they are in terms of implementing a project management tool. So I see a good batch of mixed answers. Some of them have implemented some tools, are currently implementing them. Some folks are starting to use Monday.com, which I'm sure that Kirby's last session was very insightful in his experience at Fallbrook Unified. It was great to hear his experience from implementing this with one project, which was a huge project from what we all, agree on. All right, none yet. I love it, Ryan. Hopefully you'll be able to take some key takeaways from our experience from some of the ladies that are going to be presenting during this session. By the way, I'm biased, but these ladies are amazing. They're going to share some of their experiences with all of you. Just do me a favor. If there are any questions, feel free to add them in the chat. We're going to have some time at the end of this presentation to make sure that we're going over, if time allows, to go over all of your questions. And any remaining questions that are not answered, we'll be sure to document that so that there could be some follow-up. And at the end of this presentation, we'll also have a slide with our information if anybody has any individual questions for any of the presenters. All right. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. It's 10:02. I promise 2 minutes. So I know some folks are still joining our session. We'll leave this slide up. Like I said, if you haven't done already so, please share with us what project management tools are you currently using at your organization, if any, and are you currently using a project charter? Go ahead and share that on the chat. And then if you already answered that, go ahead and take a look at some of the answers from some of your peers, some of your, the folks that are joining us in this session. All right. If everybody's okay with it, let's go ahead and get started. Sounds good. Right. Well, thank you everyone who for selecting this session. Thank you for taking the time to join us here. It's an exciting time. It's an exciting topic that it's going to be covered during the session, specifically because we know that in order for you to successfully implement any type of project, any type of course or any type of system, if you may, it's important to have a start and to really have some solid a plan in order for you to be able to know how to do it, how to be successful, and learn from others that have successfully done it or are currently implementing it at their districts. And so what we thought when we were getting together, myself and the team here, which they're going to be, sharing a little bit about themselves in just a few seconds. But we thought it would be a really good for, to gather everyone's input based on their current experience at their districts. All of us come from a different background. All of us are in different school districts around the San Diego County, but we all have a different lens and different experience when we talk about project charters. And so that's why we decided to do a panel discussion to make sure that we're sharing our individual experience and also what we've learned from each other. Because believe it or not, like I said, when I say that these three ladies are amazing, I myself have learned so much from them while working on this presentation alone. So I know that each and every one of you is going to have some great takeaways. and you're going to be able to, draw from their experience. And so hopefully, every single one of you gets to walk away from this presentation with, even one key takeaway that you're going to be ready to implement with your team or district and organization. My name is Carlos Salazar. I'm the IT director here at King Chavez Neighborhood of Schools. We are a network of charters here in the San Diego County. We have 5 different schools. We provide supports to 2 additional outside charter schools, so a total of 7 schools. We have around 2,000 students. We have about 200 staff here. And so project management, specifically here at King Chavez, is something that is a well-known word, however, not a well-known process. And what I mean by that is that, everybody has their own style of doing and leading projects, but we all know here in our organization that project management is something that is not just for IT. It's something that spans across all of our departments in different shapes or forms. And so I'm going to share a little bit throughout this presentation, a little bit of, where King Chavez is at, and a little bit of, of the project management, what it means for us when we say project management. And I'll let the presenters introduce themselves now. Edith?
Edith, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Carlos. Good morning. My name is Edith Loredo. I work in Sweetwater Union High School District for the last 13 years as a senior programmer analyst in the IT department. And I agree with Carlos when he said that program management is in the district, but we need to learn. There's so much to learn, and that's why this seminar has been very useful for us. So we have a lot of takeaways, and we want to share our experience with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith.
Hi, my name is Michelle Jimenez. I'm a project manager in the IT division at the San Diego Unified School District. I've worked for the district for 14 years in various capacities, and I've been in the IT department for the last 7. We currently are using Smartsheet as our project management tool to track all the projects across our division, and we just started using a project charter in the last couple of months.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Casperson. I'm the Director of Educational Technology in San Marcos Unified School District in North County. We are a district of about 20,000 students, 18 schools. In my role as Director of Educational Technology, I oversee EdTech, and I also oversee the IT department, along with an amazing coordinator who I believe is in the room, Tony Cabral, my right-hand man. Good to see you. We did not use a project charter prior to attending the academy this year. Tony and I attended together. We have started to use it now. We use Google Docs a lot and have used Trello a little bit as well, and are looking forward to expanding our use of these different products in the future.
Thank you. So there you have it, folks. We have an amazing cohort of, a well-rounded experience here in our session. And just a little bit about our session, I just want to quickly share how this topic came to be. The theme of our session really could be found by the phrase all roads lead to Rome. And what that means is each and every one of us finds ourselves in a different journey, walking in the same direction with similar goals to improve our organizations, to improve academic achievement, to improve efficiency. But all of us are in different spots when it comes to the journey of project management. And so Stephanie, Michelle, Edith, they all have come from a different background, but they all share something in common, is that they want to improve their organizations, right? And we recognize that, that each and every one of us shares a different experience. So we wanted to share this with all the, single one of you from the audience. We wanted to share our perspective, but it also means that it might not look like what is currently in your district. And that's the beauty of project management, is that each and every one of us can relate to a certain extent, but we all will take back as much as we want or we can or we're allowed to back into our districts, right? Maybe you, like I said, you take away one key takeaway after this presentation and you want to implement that with your department, or even just starting with yourself, right? Which we're going to talk about throughout this presentation is what does it look like to start with, by yourself? And should you stay working in a project management role by yourself, or is it beneficial to grow and expand with to a team? But you're going to hear a little bit more from each and every one of us. But like I said, this is all roads lead to Rome, meaning you are going to be in your individual road. And so we're hoping that you have some key takeaways from this presentation that you can take back to your schools and districts. And this is a panel discussion. We're going to be asking some questions of our presenters. I'm going to be asking some tough questions, very intentional. We're going to be very transparent, right? Because we're not perfect. Like I said, this is not a pretty, perfect journey, but we are walking away in that same direction of wanting to better, wanting to improve, wanting better outcomes. Because at the end of the day, we know that better outcomes equal better opportunities for our students and our staff. So with that further ado, we're going to start with some questions. All right. And so panelists, are you ready? Awesome.
Yes.
So the first question I have is, which section of the project charter made the most impact on your current projects?
Hi, Carlos. If you allow me, I would like to answer this one. For me, it was the planning, and I'm going to tell you the reasons why. First, because it takes a lot of time to put it together, and it's the first phase of the project charter, as the planning. So second, I consider that it is a very critical phase in the life of the project you are working on, because if the planning is not well defined, everything else will be built on a wrong base. And third, at the beginning, it takes a lot of time, and it can be seen as you are wasting time that you can use actually working in the actual project. However, I learned that it is time that is well invested, and it rewards you at the end because you accomplish the project with the minimum bumps in the road. And also the results are what you are expecting. So the stakeholders are well informed on each step of the journey, and they know their roles and responsibilities. The rest of the sections of the project are also important. I'm not going to say they are not important, but I think the planning is the one that impacted more. And the rest of the sections are important too, but I see them as a puzzle, because once you have a well-defined plan, then it's kind of putting all the pieces together, and it's everything falls in place. Thank you.
Yeah, I really like that. And thank you for sharing that, Edith, because I think if we recall to yesterday's session, Mr. Rick Roberts mentioned something that really stuck to me. He said something along the lines of a project charter is almost like a contract. It's a document that says we're agreeing on this, right? And a contract binds everybody, that's all the stakeholders together, and not in a form of, of you're stuck with us or you're stuck with this, but in a form of like, we're trying to accomplish something as a team. Let's all agree on the, on the goals. And this is the piece of paper that we're using to track that progress and making sure that we can move along and we can accomplish what we said, set out from the beginning. Anybody else?
I'm muted and now I turn my camera off. I wanted to add a little bit to that. For me, the sections within the charter that were most impactful, for the first one for me was the risk assessment. I don't think I've done enough of that in the past, but really thinking about what could go wrong. And that sounds really negative and cup half empty, but what could go wrong so that we can start to analyze what can we do to prevent that from going wrong? Like, what are steps that we can make? And doing that in my most recent project has made a big impact for me. And then the success criteria. I was actually meeting with a group in my educational services department this week, and we were talking about our plans for professional development all year long. And nobody sat and talked about, well, what's it going to look like at the end of the year if this project we're putting together is successful? And everybody kind of stepped back and went, we often don't do that. So I think those two have really made a big impact on me.
Yeah, absolutely. We always say begin with the end goal in mind, but sometimes we don't take the time to chart what that end goal in mind looks like. We know that we want to accomplish something big and we want to accomplish something to better, but at the same time, we sometimes can oversee that. So thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. Second question I have is why do you think that it's important to list stakeholders on the project charter?
I can answer that one, Carlos. It's important to list the stakeholders on the project charter for many reasons, but the first and foremost is that this is the key group of decision makers that are going to determine whether your project is successful or not. So it's essential that you understand who they are and what their expectations are during the project. This is the group that you're also going to engage with from the very beginning to figure out what the outcome should look like, what's in scope, what the expected deliverables are, and what that timeline should look like. And then throughout the project, this is the group of people that you need to send updates to, the status updates, including if there's any roadblocks, how these are being handled, and if there's timeline changes. You definitely want to notify this group that deliverables may be a little late or milestones aren't going to be met. And then basically staying engaged with your stakeholders is the key to making your project a success.
Yeah, I completely agree. Go ahead, Stephanie. You wanted to share something?
Yeah, I was just going to add that for me, I like to look at that list of stakeholders on a regular basis and look at the project's progress from their lens. Like, what would this person, how would they see we've progressed as of now? Is it the same as my progress, or do they think I should have done more or less? Really looking at through their lens. And so I go back and I look at that list on a regular basis to remind myself of really who we're working for.
Yes, that's very, very important. So looking at it from a team perspective, but also from the individuals that are part of stakeholders, right? Taking part of it, because like Stephanie, you shared, your vision or your view of the project is completely different than from one that is working maybe as a systems analyst, or maybe somebody that's working on the food and nutrition services department. So definitely having those perspectives is very helpful. For us at King Chavez, just to interject a little bit, one of the things that it was so important for us to list stakeholders, including our principals in decisions. I know that in the past, we have meetings and I provide a report to the principals, letting them know what is the update of any project that has to do with their sites. But never did it occur to me that they are actual stakeholders that should be kept making decisions along the lines of the project, and for them to be able to be a part of the process, not just the beginning and the result. So that was something that was huge for us in our district, to realize that stakeholders and keeping them informed is very, very important. It's not just to make decisions, but also to track along the progress of the project itself. All right, next question I have. What are some of the examples of out of scope in a project you've completed in the past? Oh, this is a good one.
I'm currently doing a project that has a couple of different items that are out of scope. So I feel like it's a good example. We're refreshing 10,000 Chromebooks right now, end of life Chromebooks that we needed to. We're gonna have to pull those back in and purchase new ones. And we went through this process. Tony and I did, using the project charter and using the other tools in the toolkit. And at first, there were some items that we were considering to keep in scope. And then I realized, no, that's a separate project. So in this case, one of those is the actual distribution of the Chromebooks to the students. That's done by our librarians. Each school has kind of their own process, and I needed to keep my hands out of their cookie jar. I needed to make sure that I let them do it how they needed to do it, and it was not my responsibility, and therefore I shouldn't include that in my project. And then the other piece for us also is we're going to be either auctioning or selling those devices, either to students or auctioning them online. We decided to keep that as a separate project as well, because it didn't have anything to do with us being successful in purchasing these Chromebooks and getting them ready for students. It is completely separate. And so that's been helpful for me, because I think it might have been overwhelming if we tried to include all of that into one project.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great that you mentioned that. Stephanie, I have a follow-up to that comment. At what point in your project did you realize that the students, the distribution of the Chromebooks were going to be a separate project, or were going to be a separate task?
I would say that the sale, we decided right away. The sale of them was, we were going to sell them. That was going to be a separate project. Originally, we had the distribution in our scope and in part of our steps. And that's when I started meeting with principals to talk about this, that I said, wait a minute, you're doing it different the way than you're doing it. And I said, this is out of scope. So it was partway into the project that we actually pulled that off. And that's the joy. I mean, I know that you want to keep your charter set, but if you really have a change, you really should make that change, just to document it for future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that folks that are on this session can relate that sometimes the project charter, as you're going through the project itself, you realize that there are some things that need to be removed, or it is a project that you realize, you know what, this is a separate project. That happened to us here at King Chavez with our current student refresh device refresh. And similar to Stephanie, we realized, you know what, the selling of the old devices is actually going to be its own task, its own project. So we were going to set the expectations from the beginning and say, you know what, this is going to be tackled through a different project at a different time. Let's focus on this, distributing making sure that we acquire the devices, making sure that everything goes successfully with that, and then let's move on to project number 2. All right, moving forward. Next question I have is, how specific should the list of deliverables be on any given project?
I'll chime in on that one. Sorry, I'm kind of dominating the conversation. Forgive me, but it needs to be specific enough that you know what you need to be doing. So, for example, you're going to have a video to help people know how to do multi-factor authentication, or you're going to have a document to give people with step-by-step directions. However, you don't need to necessarily include what's going to be in that video, or an outline of what's going to be in the document. So it's specific. I think we need to have someone might need to mute. It needs to be specific enough to keep you like on task, but don't get caught up in the weeds. Don't try and do everything on that first day with that project charter, because then you'll never get off the project charter.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. I think that the deliverables are more of a high level. And then you can build out your task in whatever you use, Monday.com, Smartsheet, whatever you use. But the deliverables are that high level task with the dates that they need to be met. And then on your other sheets, that's where you would get into the weeds, but not on the project charter.
Right. Yeah, and that's very important to recognize that the project charter is not your project management tool, perhaps, right? A project manager, and that's one of the key takeaways from even Kirby's presentation, was that there was a project charter, there was the goals that were established, but the how and how to keep folks informed of it is through the project management tool, which many of you are using either a spreadsheet, Monday.com, Trello, we name it, right? There's a lot of tools, but the process itself and the project charter is the high deliverable. So I like that you use that, Michelle. All right. Anybody else that wants to chime in on that question? Nope. Okay.
You guys already nailed it. I agree with you.
Moving on. So, this is going to be a good one, and I'm sure that everybody's going to be listening on very closely to this. What are some of the roadblocks you've encountered while implementing the project charter?
I would like to take this one.
Go for it.
Thank you. Believe it or not, the first roadblock is for the teams to accept the idea of using a project charter. Many people resist the change and see it as unnecessary. Then also see it as a waste of time. Other roadblock is try to rush in the planning. As I mentioned before, it is very important to have it right. Spend the time, brainstorm, and have set the goal and make sure it is well defined. So we need to take the necessary time to brainstorm, to get to the goal, identify the steps, the risk, and it takes time and effort. Rushing to move forward can set us back. Bad planning is almost the same as no planning. And another roadblock is to try to minimize or don't give importance to potential risks. and leave it for later because we don't need to worry about them right now. It can affect. So I
Yeah.
think those are the ones that I will say. Thank you.
Yeah, Edith, it sounds like you throughout your answers to these questions, you've kind of weaved a theme of paving the way and making sure you're investing into a project management and project charter, right? Beginning to implement. And at the beginning, it might seem to some folks like it's a daunting task, like yet another thing, right? But it does, if we can look at the project charter and investing, looking at it as an investment, right? We're I think somebody mentioning something about yesterday during sessions about it's like budgeting, right? I think it was Rick Robertson said this. Charter or project management, it's like budgeting. You want to sit down, you want to plan accordingly, and then you want to live life, right? So it's the same thing, in this case, it's very applicable. So it sounds like Sweetwater Unified, and specifically you, Edith, you're investing and you're giving folks the tools to be able to say, hey, you know what? Yes, it's going to take an additional time, but this is actually going to pay in dividends in the near future.
Yeah.
So that's
payback.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, I mean, Sweetwater Unified is not a small school district. It's one of the largest here in San Diego. So I'm sure that some of the roadblocks and some of the themes and responses from your school, I know that you're going to mention a little bit later during our presentation, Edith, about those. So I'm excited, for you to share with us and the audience.
Okay. Thank you,
All
Carlos.
right. Next question is, can one of you, or I'm sorry, not one of you, can one person, staff, one individual successfully implement a project management process by themselves? And if the answer is yes or no, why do you feel this way?
I can answer that one, Carlos. Depending on the organization, how small or large it is would play one factor into rolling out a project management process. But overall, I would say it takes a team to be successful. It's possible that one person spearheads it, but to get the buy-in from your team or an organization, you really need to get some input from those who will be affected. Collaborating with the team is a great way to bounce ideas off each other, get different perspectives that could add to the success. And also it makes them feel like they played a part in development of the process, and they'll probably be more likely to be receptive to the change.
Yeah, I like that. Bringing the stakeholders.
Sorry, there's a little bit of a lag. The joy of online conferences. No, I would share that I think it's more effective and efficient to work as a group. But if you are a small district and you have, like, if you're the cheese standing alone, then think about your stakeholders and meet with someone who this is going to really affect. So, for example, when we did our rollover of Synergy to being in-house and using their assessment system instead of Illuminate, maybe if I was a team of one, I couldn't necessarily meet with my team, but educational services and different people in different departments were going to be strongly affected by that. So at least meeting with them to talk about possible risks or meeting with them to see what they want as a success criteria will at least help you to have those conversations and start to think outside the box.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's important for, the theme of this conference is, everybody is in project land. Everybody's in a different, we're all on a journey, whether you're a small school district or you're a large organization, like San Diego Unified, or, somebody with, an IT department of one that does it all, that wears all the hats. It's important to recognize that, that we want to drive change, but at the same time, we want to involve folks that are going to be able to partake in this project and involve them and say, hey, let's come together to the table. And here's this problem. How can we solve it? Or here's this process. How can we better this? Or here's an outcome that we want to both achieve. How can we get to it? And having those conversations as a team and involving those stakeholders on the table, I think it's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. All right, next question I have is, were there any unforeseen outcomes, whether positive or negative, after implementing a project charter? So any unforeseen outcomes?
Yeah, I think I expected it to make things a little bit better. What I didn't expect was it really brought us together as a team. Tony and I working on this together, we were both on the same page. We were both looking through the same lens. I think it did build our team and make us stronger, and also made me stay more focused and remind myself not to go. I mean, as we all said, we all have a lot of jobs. You know, I do ed tech and IT. You know, I do a lot. So keeping me focused on that, it also reduced my stress. Like knowing that I was very aware of what the next step was, I was aware of what I had accomplished and where I was going. It helped reduce stress. And I think all of us, you know, since the beginning of COVID till now, anything that we could do to reduce our stress levels, I think is well worth putting time into.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll quickly chime in from our experience. You know, something that we saw an unforeseen outcome is a positive one for us, was that the stakeholders that were a part of the project, you know, the very first project that we decided to implement, which was their student device refresh, were the principals and our CFO. You know, they shared how they felt that we're included in the project. That in you know, in terms past, they relied on IT. Right, they got, you know, make sure that all the information that was collected from them, meaning like student counts and the different devices that were going to be purchased and refreshed, they were part of the process to a certain extent. But once we started to implement the project charter, everybody felt like they were a part of not just the beginning and at the end of the outcome, but throughout the process itself. And so I got a quote from my CFO. It says, you know, she said, thank you for including me, and not just including me when it was time to speak about finances. That was her quote, right? And so it felt like she was a part of it, and it really does bring everybody together as a team, right? And I think that's something that we all are trying to accomplish is, as IT departments, how can we innovate, and how can we become a partner rather than a department that is always, you know, putting out fires, right? And I think I use this theme with my department or my team. I say, how can we move from being firefighters into being a partner and a stakeholder that's sitting at the table, coming up with solutions? And I think that's the goal for all of us. And I think that's something that's very important for each and every one of us. You know, each and every one of the people that are here on the session is to ask yourself, you know, where am I in the journey, and where do I want to be, and what do I want to accomplish? So yeah. Last and final question. And by the way, folks, if you have any questions, you know, from the audience for any of one of us, you know, directly for one of the presenters, or if you want to just ask just a general question that one of us will take on, please go ahead and add it on the chat. And I think we are going to have some time, a few minutes before the end of the session, to make sure that we go over your questions. So feel free to go ahead and add it to the chat. And I think that Matt says, should have waited if you've answered it. If we already answered your question, that's great, no worries. But if you have any additional questions, maybe you think of something that was mentioned during the presentation that you'd like one of us to expand further on. So feel free to use that chat feature. But like I said, very last question before we move on to the next section, which Edith is going to lead us through. Can each of you share the current state of the project management implementation at your department or at your district?
I can answer that, Carlos. So here at San Diego Unified School District, back in 2018, the IT division implemented Smartsheet as our tool to track all the projects being done throughout the IT departments. This is a way to have all the projects recorded and tracked in a consistent format. This also enabled us to roll the projects up to a dashboard, which was transparent to our stakeholders. They can go on this dashboard, see what projects are happening, where their project is, what the percent complete is. So it gave a lot of transparency through this tool. But a project charter wasn't part of this. It wasn't part of the process until recently. And although a project can't start without this type of information, it wasn't gathered in a formal or consistent way. It was left up to each supervisor to collect that information and record it wherever they wanted, Google, OneDrive. But then I was fortunate enough to attend the K-12 Project Management Academy hosted by the county. And during the academy, they introduced and discussed the project charter in detail. This made complete sense to gather all this pertinent information in one document. So I needed to figure out a way to introduce this to our division. As you know, change can be difficult. It's not always accepted real well, especially when you have a certain culture, how you handle things in your department. So I first met with the executive director. I needed to get him on board before I implemented it. And he immediately saw the benefits that it would provide to our division. By using the project charter, we would ensure that the planning process was well thought out by the team before putting the project into Smartsheet. But there were concerns. We didn't want to add to the workload of our supervisors. Our supervisors actually in our district, they function as the project manager, the functional manager, and the SME on their projects. So they're already invested in their projects quite a bit. So we didn't want this to be perceived as something tedious and time consuming, but we wanted to stress, take time to plan or plan to fail. So the next step was to get the buy-in from the supervisors. So this was essential since it would affect them, impact them directly. And I knew there would be some challenges. It's not always easy to add or change what's been established. So we had a meeting to discuss the project charter. And throughout the meeting, I assured the team that I wanted to find a way to create a project charter that worked for them. The template that the county offers is what they use, and it's perfect for them. But I also knew that it may not work for us completely. So we walked through the project charter, discussed each area, and then it was decided what we would keep, what we would combine, and then what we could eliminate. So so then we finally had the final project charter that everybody was comfortable with, and the supervisors were willing to adopt to their project management process. So once the final charter was in place, I added it and linked it to our project charters where we create in Smartsheet. And immediately there were benefits. First, it gave us a well thought out foundation for a clear roadmap to build out the project in an organized fashion. It also allowed the project team to get a clear understanding of the whole project process. Sometimes the team isn't brought into that process and they're just given snippets like, you do this is your task, this is your area. But by them being involved in that process, they saw the whole thing, who the project's stakeholders were, what was the description, what's in scope, what's out of scope, given an opportunity to discuss those risks, how those would be mitigated. So it really gave them an overall picture of the project. In addition, it was for the scope section, bulleted points like what's in scope, and that transferred into our Smartsheet template perfectly. All we needed to do really at that point is copy and paste into our project management tool. So that was a great benefit also, adopting the project charter and writing those out completely. So overall, it's been a great addition to the tools that we use in our project management process. And it's a learning curve. We're still not there 100%, but we definitely are moving forward. So it's pretty exciting.
Michelle?
So I would say Michelle and San Diego Unified are a lot further along than San Marcos. So where we are in our roadmap, Tony and I had the pleasure of attending the academy together, and that was helpful. And so we decided let's start small with one project. So we were brand new to project management, where that's Michelle's job is project management. So we did projects, don't get me wrong, but we didn't have a system. And we've even attended trainings in the past through Fred Pryor and other places, and never really found something that really stuck. Like I felt like I was cooking spaghetti, throwing it on the wall, and it was falling off. And I think this one's going to stick. I really, really do, because it's easy to use. And so now we're starting some other projects this summer. We're going to move forward. We have 10 people from our district attending, from people who work with Synergy and our student information system. Some of our admin secretaries are attending. We wanted to get everybody kind of the background information, and then we're going to pull the trigger in the fall. So we're doing baby steps right now. How about you, Edith? Where are you in the process?
Thank you, Stephanie. At Sweetwater, we are in the learning curve of project charters. There's a lot of roadblocks that we have to overcome to move forward. The lucky ones that learn about the advantage of using this tool have the mission to spread and help the others to get into the wagon in the best interest of the projects that we develop in the district.
That's awesome. And I know, Edith, you're going to be sharing a little bit about their experience with one specific project, right?
Yeah.
Here. So let's go ahead and move forward into that. Let me see. Oh, there it is. Okay, go ahead and take it away, Edith.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Okay, I want to share with you guys one experience that it was a very challenging project, and it was because it was missing a project charter. There were no documentation. So let me tell you the story, and I'm going to start with long time ago, back in 2012. I was assigned to help transportation with an issue that they were experiencing. At the beginning of each school year, the parents were making long lines under the sun, waiting for their turn to buy a bus pass for the student or their students. The reason why is because the service is limited and the seats are assigned as first come, first serve. So the objective was to create an application where the parents could buy the bus passes online to make it easier for them and avoid them to make long lines under the sun, and also sometimes taking day off to do this. So the assumption was that the project was very easy. The application supervisor with her right hand were the contacts with transportation, the direct contacts with transportations, and they brought to me all the requirements. I was a senior programmer assigned to create this application. As the project was progressing, new information was brought to me. Existing information was changing, and then the confusion started taking over. I was not allowed to talk directly to transportation. So the first launch, as you can imagine, didn't go well. And the second one and the third one, and then by then, finger pointing was popular. Transportation was getting tons of complaints of frustrated parents that they couldn't use the tool. They were also frustrated as well because it was not working, and they wanted to go back and keep the long lines and parents under the sun because at least that was working. So the results were chaos, failure, frustration, confusion, lack of confidence, anxiety, etc. You name it. So several years passed and every year was challenging. July 1st was the start of the season and nobody wanted to be there on such day. It was a big headache. By 2016, a new director started working in my department, and he came with experience that was missing. And the first question that he asked was, where is the documentation of this project? And everybody was, what? What is he talking about? Nobody knew how to answer that simple question. He requested from me to document the project using a format, the format of the SRD, System Requirement Document. In return, I asked him to let me work directly with transportation and get rid of the elements that were toxic for this project. We shake hands and I start The most difficult task I had to deal with was to bring aboard the end users, because by then it was completely lack of trust. They were completely opposed to use the app since it was causing them more headaches than being useful for them. So they were at the point that they preferred to keep the long lines, upset parents, knowing that at the end they will be able to serve the parents than using the app. So against their will, my director and I started having regular meetings with them, the subject matter experts, and all the rest of the stakeholders. The goal was to understand the current process and be able to document the end product that they were expecting to have. Roles and responsibilities were defined. A timeline was created and small milestones were set. Once the document was completed, evaluated, and approved, signed off by all the stakeholders, then I was ready to start working in the app. It was like having a puzzle, like I mentioned before. It was like having a puzzle. All the pieces start falling into their place and things start going well. As the small milestones were completed, the end users start turning their resistance into questions and also suggestions. And they were at the point that they were feeling part of the project. That for me was a success. And then their comments were kind of, this is for us. Please make sure X items work like this. And they were giving me examples. And they were comparing what they have against what they wanted. That was exactly what I needed. So the results were that trust was rebuilt. And that was, I can say it very simple, but it was the hardest task for us. The stakeholders know what their roles were and what were their responsibilities. The scope of the system was well defined and all the stakeholders were in the same page. Everybody knew how the system should work. That was very important. And then at the end, the parents were able to buy their bus passes online. That was finally, we achieved the goal. Then we saw the need for an appointment because not all the parents wanted to do it online. So we created an appointment system that for the parents that didn't want to do it online, had the turn in the office because we don't want it more nights. Transportation was able to serve all those few parents at the office and also serve walk-ins that in the past were sent away. So for us was like A+. And all of this happened because the magic of planning and documenting. That's why I think it's very important, and I'm so pleased that I was part of this seminar and I learned about the project charter. A simple document that takes a lot of time at the beginning, but rewards the team at the end because all the stakeholders know exactly what to expect and what are their roles. My takeaway is that the more time you take to create a project charter is the less time you are going to suffer building a project. I hope it helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. You closed this session with a bow. Thank you for sharing the project charter and how the impact that it has in your organization and your department. And ultimately, I mean, we see that the timeline from 2016 and on, it has been a change. And so there's been quite a few years, but nevertheless, it has improved. And that's what we're trying to do, right? So folks, we are out of time. We're 3 minutes over our session. I apologize for keeping everybody, but it was too good to not share. So thank you so much for joining our sessions. If you have any individual questions, I'm going to be posting our little slide that has some of our email addresses. If you have any questions for us individually, please feel free to reach out. Please feel free to reach out to us directly or through I believe there's a Padlet that has a section for questions. If you have anything that you would like for us to further just provide some further explanations on, or just you just want to chat, directly with these amazing presenters, feel free to use that Padlet, and we'll be sure to follow up with you. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, presenters. Thank you for taking the time and for sharing your experience. We really appreciate every single one of you and your transparency. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And real quick, those slides are in Sketch. So my email address and Carlos's email address are on that slide if you wanted to reach out to us directly.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.